I'm just like taking some deep breaths and they're like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Well, does it matter if I am or not? Because I can't change it, right? Like I need this exam." Welcome to Her Fertility, the podcast revolutionizing the way women are supported on their fertility journey. I'm your host, Jess Timms. With years of supporting women as a fertility doula, I've seen the emotional pain caused by infertility, including my own struggle with unexplained infertility. And I always knew there had to be a better way to support women with their fertility health and healing. This is the first podcast to combine the principles of spirituality and energy healing with the research-based fertility data to support you in a way you've never seen before. You can stop feeling alone, confused, frustrated, and overwhelmed, and start finding the answers you've been looking for, because this podcast goes so much deeper than anything you can search for online. If you're ready to find a new spiritual perspective for your fertility journey, then press play. We are here to reclaim control, find clarity, and transform the fertility conversation. Welcome back to the Her Fertility Podcast. I am so grateful that you're here. And however this podcast found you, thank you for spending some time with me today. Today is a foundations episode. It is really important for me to lay some foundational groundwork for people who are navigating their infertility journey so that you have an understanding of what this is, who it applies to, and I'm going to share my experience because sometimes it's helpful to know a little bit more from somebody who's gone through it. So in today's foundational episode, we are going to lift the lid and talk all about HSG exams. So whether you've heard of an HSG exam or you have no idea what I'm talking about, this episode is going to be a deep dive into what it is and what you need to know if you are going to have an HSG exam. If you've been trying to get pregnant for a while, you might go to your doctor and they're going to recommend a couple standard tests and exams, and one of them might be an HSG exam. What does HSG stand for? HSG stands for Hysterosalpingogram. That's right, a Hysterosalpingogram. So we're just going to say HSG exam. An HSG exam is used to examine the uterus and the fallopian tubes. Your doctor might recommend an HSG exam so that they can rule out whether there's any physical blockages in the uterus or the fallopian tubes that would be preventing you from getting pregnant, which can be exciting because you might get more answers for your fertility journey. But the problem is nobody talks about their experience with an HSG exam. This isn't something that we have general knowledge about. So when we don't know a lot about something, that can feel scary. We're going to break it down here so that you know exactly what to expect. You know who should be getting an HSG exam. And then, of course, I'll share a little bit about my experience with this exam when I was going through my infertility journey. What happens during the exam is they use a dye that is put up through the cervix, and then that dye is monitored on an X-ray type machine, and they watch to see how the dye flows up through the uterus and then out through the fallopian tubes. And this will show whether there's any blocks, any abnormalities in the shape of the uterus or the fallopian tubes. Typically, they use gravity to help it flow through. So sometimes the table will be tilted or your pelvis will be tilted a little bit so that the dye can flow up toward your belly button and then flow through the uterus and then, of course, into the fallopian tubes. At the same time, images are being taken. Sometimes it's video imaging, sometimes it's still images of the uterus and the fallopian tubes. And then those images will be reviewed by a clinician who can, of course, provide any results of the exam. So it can give a very good picture and an understanding of what's going on internally because, of course, we can't see our uterus and our fallopian tubes, and it's hard to know if there's any blockages happening in there. If there's any blockage in the fallopian tube, the egg might not be able to get down and in, or sperm might not be able to get up to the egg, which would prevent, like physically prevent, conception from happening. So now that we know a little bit more about what the exam is, you might be thinking, well, who should have an HSG exam, and should I ask my doctor for one? The HSG exam is for women who are trying to get pregnant and who are trying to seek clarity on the root cause of their infertility. Infertility is defined as trying to get pregnant for a year or more unsuccessfully. And that's if you're under the age of 35. If you're over the age of 35, that time frame drops down to 6 months. So if you've been trying for a year, or if you're over 35 and you've been trying for 6 months and you are not pregnant, then an HSG exam might be recommended by your doctor to help rule out any blockages that might be happening in the uterus. And it's always important to seek the advice of your medical professional. It's important to know that an HSG exam should not be performed if you are pregnant, if you have any pelvic infection or inflammation of the pelvis, or if you're experiencing any uterine bleeding. That would not be a time to have an HSG exam. Once the exam happens, the clinician will provide you with some preliminary results. Your doctor will then get those results if they're not the one doing the exam, and they will discuss any treatment options with you. So now that we know a little bit more about what the HSG exam is, who it's for, and what to expect from the exam, let me tell you about my experience with the HSG exam. I was trying to get pregnant for about a year, and I was searching for answers, and I was asking my doctor, what can we do? I want to know why I can't get pregnant. I had the classic unexplained infertility. So she suggested the HSG exam, and of course, I was super open to it. So for my doctor, she partnered with another practitioner to provide the exam, and I went by myself to the hospital. I had to go to the local hospital for my exam, and I will never forget, I have it vividly in my mind. I had to go down into the basement of the hospital. I'm there by myself, and I just had this moment of disbelief that this is where I was on my fertility journey. All I wanted was to be pregnant, and yet I'm finding myself in the basement of this hospital having an exam that honestly I didn't know what to expect from. And I just felt in that moment really lonely and really bummed out. And I will never forget that. I go in to the exam room, and it is this massive room with this huge table in the middle, and then all of this equipment like up around on the ceiling and like on the sides of this table. And of course, as we all know with fertility things, you have to like take off most of your clothes, and it's cold. And I'm laying on this table, and the clinician inserts the dye past my cervix, and honestly, it was so uncomfortable. I think part of the problem was I did not know what to expect. I was waiting for them to tell me what they were going to be doing, but they didn't do that. And so they insert the dye, which was a problem. That was the first time I learned that I have a tilted cervix, which honestly doesn't matter, but nobody told me that doesn't matter at the time. And so this clinician is like, oh, you have a tilted cervix. That makes it really hard to get the dye in. And so it was super uncomfortable. She can't get the dye in easily. So it's taking a little bit longer. And once the dye was in, I just remember for me, it was like this burning sensation in my uterus. Now, I've worked with many clients who've had this exam, and they don't have the same experience. So know that not all HSG exams are this way. I don't know why I had a burning sensation, but I did. I'm laying on this table. I'm like super uncomfortable. They go to tilt the table back, and I'm just like taking some deep breaths. And they're like, are you okay? And I'm like, well, does it matter if I am or not? Because I can't change it, right? Like I need this exam. And so I just breathe through the whole thing. I have some tears coming out of my eyeballs because it's so uncomfortable. And then by the grace of the universe, it is over at some point. And they say, okay, great, you have no blocks. And it was like that quick. They're like, you're fine, no blocks. And I'm like, then why did it hurt so bad? And so they gave me like a little pad to put on my undies and sent me on my way. So one thing that I wish I had known was that some of the dye will be absorbed by the body, but some of it comes out of the uterus, right? Kind of like a period, like some discharge. And I wish I had known that because I would have worn something different. I also want to preface this with, I have a pretty high pain tolerance. For example, when I did give birth, I gave birth unmedicated after being induced. And so for me, experiencing something that was pretty painful was surprising because for me, most of the time things aren't that painful. And again, not that this is painful for everybody. For some women, it's not, but I probably would have taken an ibuprofen or something. Just things to consider if you are going in for your HSG exam. You have to have VF, the HSG exam to rule out any physical blocks so that you can then have access to the next step, whether that's doing an assisted cycle, whether that's using IUI or IVF. The HSG exam is the gateway to those things, and you have to have that exam before moving forward. If you are at that point in your journey, know that once you have that exam and you get the results from that, you can then be prepared to have these next types of conversations. Those conversations can be tricky, right? We might not be exactly ready for them, or we might not know what to expect from them. And that is why I am so excited to share that my fertility support circle, a virtual support group, is back up and running. The fertility support circle is designed for any woman who is navigating her infertility journey. You could be navigating pregnancy loss, you could be navigating IVF. Wherever you are, this support circle is open for you to come seek support. So if that sounds like something that could support you right now, send me a message on Instagram at FertilityJess, and I'll send you all the details. I sincerely hope that this foundational episode supports you if you are preparing for an HSG exam. And I look forward to bringing you more foundational episodes here soon so that we can lay the groundwork and have a good base understanding of these fertility exams and procedures that might be a part of your journey. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Her Fertility Podcast. In a sea of big name podcasts, your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed the show, I would so appreciate your support by leaving a review on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or YouTube, wherever you listen, to help me reach as many women as possible. You can also share this episode with a friend. Sharing the podcast is the best way to help it grow and build a community of support around you on your fertility journey. If we aren't already connected, please find me at FertilityJess on social media or sign up for one of my next fertility courses or offerings at fertilityjess.com.